What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Tomatoito Boxing Show. Let's jump into the welterweight division because we just had the biggest name in the welterweight division successfully debut in front of his home crowd as the champion over a tough opponent who reminds me a lot, similar to what I mentioned about Haritunian when he fought Shakur a week ago or so. Similar to that style, like Vanes Martirosyan or a Victorchinian type style. Haritunian, similar style to Avanesyan. David Avanesyan stepped into the ring to challenge Jaron Ennis for his title. Boots, 32-0 with 29 knockouts to his credit, is arguably the strongest welterweight and the biggest name, the biggest draw at welterweight at the current moment. The welterweight division is in a bit of an odd space at the moment because Terence Crawford unified the entire division, is not going to defend his titles in that division, rather has vacated some of the titles already, and is now campaigning at 154 with his debut coming in a couple weeks' time against Israel Madrimov. And he's going to challenge Madrimov for his WBO title. When that fight happens, and should Terence Crawford dethrone Israel Madrimov, the WBO has announced that they're waiting to see what happens in that fight, because if Terence Crawford loses, then he will more than likely have the option to come back and defend his WBO title at the welterweight division. If he is successful, then they will immediately vacate the title at 147 or elevate Brian Norman Jr. to full status champion. Brian Norman Jr. beat Giovanni Santillan out in San Diego a few weeks back to become the interim WBO champion. And he did it in impressive fashion. And so he's the interim until we figure out what happens with Terence Crawford and Madrimov. Crawford is going in as a heavy favorite. Madrimov is the lesser-known fighter. But I kind of see this fight as the Bivol-Canelo. Not a lot of people knew who Dimitri Bivol was, so they immediately just discarded him and overlooked him. And the critiques, if you remember from that time, was that Canelo's fighting nobodies. And then he ends up losing, and Bivol became a superstar who was already a solid fighter in the light heavyweight division. And this is, I think, something similar that might happen to Crawford. They're overlooking Madrimov because a lot of people don't know him, especially in the U.S. Hardcore boxing fans know who Israel Madrimov is and what he brings to the table. And he's kind of like a Sergey Derevyanchenko / Triple G type fighter. Maybe not as developed as Triple G, but he has very high level pedigree boxing himself. And I think it's going to be a tougher matchup for Crawford than what people are giving him credit for, because everybody's on the Crawford hype train at the moment. So if Crawford is successful, then more than likely he will continue his campaign at 154 and try to unify that division. Remember that he originally was chasing Jermell Charlo. Now he's chasing Canelo Alvarez. And he's not giving any credit to any of the guys that are at the welterweight division. The welterweight division is at a bit of an influx right now, or a bit of a transitional period right now, where we're looking at Jaron Ennis, who in my opinion, with this victory over David Avanesyan, who's a former foe of Crawford, Jaron Ennis, in my opinion, 32 wins, 29 knockouts, is the absolute biggest draw and the absolute best fighter in the welterweight division and the IBF champion. I think he's the strongest of the champions at the moment. We have Eimantas Estañones, who I would put at number 2. I would put Brian Norman Jr. at 3 and Mario Barrios at 4. Barrios has that Gotti-like style, that Morales, the Barrera type style, where he likes to come forward, make it a fun fight, but he takes a lot of damage in doing so, and he did so from Aldana's younger brother when he fought earlier this year. He was successful, He won the fight, but he was a bloody mess. He fought him on the undercard of the Canelo Munguia fight. And Mario Barrios took a lot of damage in that fight. A fight that he initially started dominating. He drops Maidana in the third round, and it looked like he was headed for a stoppage win. And then Maidana wouldn't stop coming forward, and his nickname is very fitting. His nickname is TNT for Fabian Maidana, and he punches like that. And it was evident by the proof on Mario Barrios' face. Mario Barrios still, in my opinion, was a very good 140-pound fighter who lost to Tank, but came to prominence after that fight as a tough foe. Then he got into a fight with Keith Thurman, and he also lost that fight. Since then, he beat Giovanni Santiago, who was in similar stages in his career as Mario Barrios, but his biggest victory to date was that against Yordenis Ugas. And now he's got a third win in a row, Santiago, Ugas, and now Fabian Maidana. He is the WBC champion. Even though they still list him as the interim champion, I recall seeing that he had been elevated to full status champion by the WBC, and there's talks of him being in negotiations with Manny Pacquiao. And Manny Pacquiao has done so much in his career that he's basically skipping the line, and he's gonna, because he is a legend. And that would be not only a huge payday for Mario Barrios, but I think probably a tough test for him as well. As Manny Pacquiao, even though he is past his prime, he still has quite a bit left in the tank to be able to pose a threat to Mario Barrios. There's so much muscle memory there for Manny Pacquiao that if Mario Barrios stops Manny Pacquiao, you bet that would be the retirement of Manny Pacquiao. If he drops and hurts Manny Pacquiao, you bet that Mario Barrios' stock would elevate and skyrocket to where he would become possibly the next best fight for Boots Ennis to make. But at the moment, I think Eimantas Estañones is a very high-level, high-pedigree style boxer. I think the most elusive and the hardest puncher, the most creative has to be Boots. It's just fun to watch Jaron fight. It's fun to watch his fights. He's elusive, he's creative, he plays around in there, he has fun while he's in there, he mixes his attacks so well. He does get hit. He does get hit from time to time, and he does put himself at risk more often than most would like. But that's what makes it fun, because he plays that gambit. He's constantly putting himself in the way of danger to be able to land a big punch himself, and that risk more than often has paid off, as evident by his 29 knockouts in his record. He takes the risk and he delivers. He has a lot of punching power, and he mixes his attack very, very well. Very good footwork, very good head movement, very good hand delivery and punch delivery. So Mario Barrios being elevated to full status as the WBC champ, he's in negotiations with Manny Pacquiao. We don't know if that's going to come to fruition or not, but more than likely it will. And that's a huge shot for not just Manny Pacquiao to get himself another title, but for Mario Barrios to beat such a legend and add a name like that in his resume. He would potentially become the biggest draw in the welterweight division at that point. Where if Crawford is unsuccessful with Madrimov, you bet that he would come back down and fight Mario Barrios to try to regain his title in a big payday for both fighters, icing out Jaron Boots Ennis. He doesn't even acknowledge Boots as a legit contender. He's not giving him his due, not giving him his credit, which is only adding to fuel to the fire of the rivalry that these two guys are starting to build up against one another. Brian Norman Jr. with his victory over Giovanni Santillan, there's talks that there may be negotiations, top rank related, where Teofimo may very well debut at welterweight, getting a shot at Brian Norman Jr.'s interim title. Teofimo's been trying to bait Terence Crawford into a fight, which would be a high profile matchup between them two. So getting himself a title or an interim title in that division at welterweight would definitely be great bait for Terence Crawford to come back to welterweight and fight Teofimo. Terence Crawford is just too big for Teofimo in my opinion, but is just right for Jaron Boots Ennis. That would be an amazing fight, and it would garner the same attention, in my opinion, as Crawford Spence. Maybe not as much, but just around there, because Boots has been that type of fighter. He's that man. He's that guy that people are giving the credit due to, and people are acknowledging that he is by far the best welterweight at the moment, with the exit of Terence Crawford. Errol Spence no longer at welterweight. He's going to be debuting against Sebastian Fundora at 154. If Errol Spence is able to get his career back on track, which is very doubtful, but if he's able to get his career back on track and put some wins under his belt, especially if he dethrones the unified champ Sebastian Fundora, and Crawford beats Madrimov, you bet your ass there's going to be a rematch at 154 for 3 titles. Virgil Ortiz is another guy that has left the welterweight and is going to be debuting at 154 against Serhii Bohachuk in a Golden Boy card taking place 1 week after Crawford's card in LA. Virgil Ortiz is going to debut in Las Vegas at 154. So all these top dogs are going there. Plus, we haven't heard of Brian Castaño anymore. He's supposed to be making a return. He was the best 154-pounder next to Jermell Charlo. And then Jermell, he's been in trouble outside of the ring. We're hoping that he gets back on track and comes back and defends that throne at 154 and puts everybody in place. He's not going to fight Errol Spence, but you bet that he's had that animosity with Terence Crawford, and that would make for a huge fight. A huge mega-type fight and payday for both of them. You got Tim Tszyu. You still have Brian Mendoza. I mean, that division is awesome right now. And that's why a lot of those fighters that have left and migrated up north to 154 from welterweight has left the welterweight division at a bit of a transitional period right now. And hands down, Boots, with this victory over David Avanesian, has now cemented himself as the strongest welterweight in my opinion. So what's going to happen with, and he sold out. He fought out in Philly. Reports are that he sold, I think, 18,000 seats or something like that. He had a good viewership that he managed to pull. Boots is a real deal in my opinion, and he has been. And I got to see him fight live at the undercard of the rematch and the undisputed fight between Charlo and Castaño out in Carson. I got to see him on the undercard, and he looks good. And he fights that way. He fights that way. He looks every bit of what people are making Boots out to be. In person, he looks every bit as impressive. Estañones coming off that victory over Gabriel Maestre in that same card as Mario Barrios fought Maldana. That was the undercard of Canelo Munguia. Estañones has the WBA strap. Brian Norman Jr. waiting to see what happens with Crawford Madrimov. Mario Barrios in negotiations with Manny Pacquiao. And Jaron Ennis, fresh off of his IBF title defending victory, he's going to try to get in negotiations and unify with one of the other champions. Boots and Estañones would be the highest level fight that you could make right now at welterweight. Because I don't see Boots taking a fight with Brian Norman Jr. for an interim title to punch a ticket for Terence Crawford. Boots is going to just make his own path, carve his own pathway, and continue doing what he's doing. Estañones being a full champion, Boots is either going to be in the way of Mario Barrios if that fight with Pacquiao falls out, or he's going to get in the way of Eimantas Estañones and try to unify with one or the other. He's there. He's that guy. He wants to smoke. And so does Mario Barrios. And he's called out Boots in the past. And Eimantas Estañones is trouble for anybody. And he's a fun fighter to watch, where he's willing to mix it up and he's willing to get hit in order to land his attack as well. So very interesting, the position in which the welterweight division finds itself in, but you have a big draw in Boots Ennis, and you got to admire what he's doing, and the fact that he doesn't even care. He's calling out those fighters, but he's not worried about them. And if that fight happens, he's just going to keep working, keep winning, and get himself there. Instead of trying to get the fight through social media, he's just going to do it in the ring and continue finding opponents and continue picking them apart. Who could Boots Ennis potentially fight next? If it's not a unification bout, it has to be a big profile fight. So the only other way that I would see anybody else get in there with Boots is just going to be a stay busy fight. So we'll see. We'll see how that pans out. But Teofimo trying to convince Top Rank to let him debut at welterweight and challenge Brian Norman Jr., who holds a WBO interim title, to Crawford's full version. Imantas Estañones, no reports that I've seen as of yet for his return or who he's after. That would be the fight that I would like to make. Get Eddie Hearn involved and get him involved in getting into talks with Imantas Estañones for a big unification bout and start taking Ennis to the top of the division while everything else is at influx. And Mario Barrios, if those negotiations fall out, that would be amazing. WBC IBF unification. And as Brian Norman stands by that interim title for the full version, he would be elevated to full level champion with a successful victory for Crawford at 154. And putting that title on the line against Teofimo Lopez would not just mean a big payday for Brian Norman Jr., but a big opportunity at defending the throne and sending Teofimo back to 140, which would only elevate his negotiation power with Boots, with Barrios, with Estañones going forward. And Norman is no joke. Brian Norman Jr. is in your face and fights from in close and delivers a lot of power, generates a lot of power from a very short distance, and is very elusive and very creative in the way, in the style in which he poses. So I'll leave you guys with that. Let me know what you guys think about the welterweight division and the position that it finds itself in. Remember, check me out on Instagram. I usually place a post on there corresponding to these episodes, and that's where we could communicate. If you want to find me on X, go for it, but I'm really not too big into X. Every so often I'm active on there. Other than that, you could email the show directly. But I would say you could converse with me through Instagram. And then other than that, you could leave me a message here. If you find me on Buzzsprout, you could leave me a message directly on there. And you guys know that I always love your comments. And please like and rate the show. Please rate the show if you appreciate what you're listening to. The only reason the show continues to grow is because of you guys, and because you guys continue to spread the word and share the episodes, and the show continues to grow, and doors are starting to open up for the Toma Todito Boxing Show as far as getting invites to do press coverage at these large events. So very, very awesome. Thank you guys again for all the love, for all the support, and for continuing to check out the episodes. And I'll check you guys out on the next episode. Have yourselves a great night. Take care.